gentlemen.
Blackbeard, known as the most evil and notorious pirate of them all. However, there is reason to believe that he has been undeservedly vilified and became a legend based upon authors wanting to sell books rather than his own decisions and actions. This fantasy he created gave way to a monster known as Blackbeard rather than Captain Teach, a man worried about his family's welfare above all else. We can all agree that he was a pirate, but historians and legends allow the truth to be greatly expanded upon. In one account, he was accused of prostituting his wife out to his crew members while he watched, and over the course of his life married 12 separate women. But was it beneficial for men and sailors to believe that he was a devil reincarnated? One is led to believe that the fear of fear was more suitable than Blackbeard rather than the fear of his actions. But what makes his story interesting is that it is all contributed to a single source, a general history of the robberies and murders of the most notorious pirates. As they say, flamboyant tradition makes good content, and the imagination most certainly ran wild in this story. The author Robert Lee says, first impressions were important, daring and horrifying in the appearance as the deeds. However, contradicting thoughts such as journalist Colin Woodward says, Blackbeard was remarkably judicious in the use of his force. In the dozens of eyewitness accounts of his victims, there is not a single instance in which he killed anyone prior to his fatal final battle with the Royal Navy. Another scholar said the chances of survival of Blackbeard's victims were higher than with most pirates, and they would live to tell the tale, and that he was hardly the murderous rogue that officials claimed him to be. Another example said, I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that Blackbeard ever used violence against anyone. One school of thought was that it was a snow job done by the British government to tarnish his reputation, especially as the golden age of piracy was coming to an end. Once the new regime took over, they wanted to paint privateers as merciless humans to turn the public against these lawless individuals. Parliament had hired individuals to curve these stories and publish them. However, more interesting than that is that his early childhood and transition into piracy is hard to find information about, and there is even some confusion as to what his last name was. Some say that he was related to the North Carolina colonial governor William Drummond and that he was actually born in North Carolina. Others have reason to believe that he was born in Bristol, England, but any documents that might have shed light on this birth were destroyed by fires or bombing during the war. Bristol had a major maritime tradition, so that may have been why he moved there, but accounts say that he was born in Gloucestershire, but all these records have been destroyed. Another example is that there's a family of Thatches in Jamaica recorded in the St. Catherine's Parish files. This family was not villainous or notorious at all and were in fact quite patrician as they described. In both these cases, he would have been born to credible parents. However, there is not enough information to definitely say that this was his story of origin. There are records of an Edward Thatch serving in the Royal Navy aboard the HMS Windsor in 1706. This may be why the Board of Trade and Parliament tried to ruin his name, because he was an ex-Navy man. The other credible theory was that he was born in Gloucestershire, England, where he was born to a reverend father who graduated from Oxford University. All records exist of the family except for one son named Edward Teach. Bristol, which was a major city nearby, had a major maritime tradition, and he may have got his start in privateering there. In either case, he were to come from a peaceful, credible, and affluent family.
Blackbeard began his seagoing career as a privateer in the War of Spanish Succession. Following the war, Blackbeard traveled to the island of New Providence in the Bahamas to begin his career as a pirate. Blackbeard joined the crew of the famous pirate Benjamin Hornigold, who mentored Blackbeard as he started his career. Following Captain Hornigold's retirement, Blackbeard began a solo career and began to make a name for himself as a pirate in the Caribbean. Blackbeard had a string of successful attacks in the West Indies, where he captured the French ship La Concorde and renamed her the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard outfitted the Queen Anne's Revenge with over 40 guns, making her a fierce and formidable warship. While Blackbeard had a fearsome reputation for violence, there is no records of him torturing or murdering any of his victims. Blackbeard purposely cultivated this fearsome reputation in order to instill fear into his enemies. In time of action, he wore a sling over his shoulders. with 3 brace of pistols hanging in holsters like bandoliers. He wore a fur cap and stuck a lighted match on each side under it, which appearing on each side of his face. His eyes, naturally looking fierce and wild, made him altogether such a figure that imagination cannot form an idea of a fury from hell to look more frightful. Blackbeard continued his piracy and proceeded back to the American colonies for what was to be the boldest move of his entire career, the blockade of Charleston, South Carolina. Blackbeard sailed the Queen Anne's Revenge to the entrance of the port of Charleston in May of 1718. Blackbeard was able to successfully capture every vessel in and out of the port of Charleston. On board one of the vessels Blackbeard captured were a number of wealthy and prominent South Carolina citizens, including a member of the South Carolina Council. With prominent citizens in his captivity, Blackbeard had great leverage and would be able to ask for almost any ransom that he desired. Blackbeard had taken Charleston hostage. However, Blackbeard only demanded from the citizens of Charleston a relatively small amount of medicine. It is widely believed that Blackbeard needed this medicine for a disease he contracted in a brothel, most likely syphilis. Following the blockade of Charleston, Blackbeard purposely marooned the Queen Anne's Revenge and proceeded with a few close companions to Bath, North Carolina, where he received a pardon from the governor of North Carolina. Charles Eden, the governor of North Carolina, had a much more lax stance towards piracy than the governors of neighboring Virginia and South Carolina.
After he traveled Bath to receive his royal pardon, he sought permission and received it to sail the St. Thomas as a privateer. But instead of doing this, he traveled up to the Delaware Bay and resumed his pirate activities. Once this was found out, a warrant for his arrest was issued by the governor of Pennsylvania. However, he was thought to be protected in North Carolina by Governor Eden due to the spending that his crew brought to the area. Therefore, the governor of Virginia decided to take action against the dreaded pirate. Alexander Spotswood, who was the governor of Virginia, was not only out to rid the colony of the dreaded pirate, but also wanted to receive the influence and prestige of capturing America's most notorious pirate at the time. He financed the whole operation on his own dime, hoping to take Blackbeard's treasure to himself. In order to find Blackbeard, he was able to arrest and try the quartermaster of the Queen Anne's Revenge and get the location of Blackbeard and his remaining crew. Governor Spotswood sent 2 contingents of force over land, led by Captain Gordon and Captain Brand, and 1 overseas, under the command of Lieutenant Robert Maynard. The naval force arrived at Ocracoke Island on November 21, 718, but waited until the next morning light to attack the pirates after sending out nighttime patrols to locate the pirates. As soon as Blackbeard saw the arriving forces the next morning, he cut the anchor cable and raised up his pirate flag. Being outnumbered in ships 2 to 1, Blackbeard was however able to manage to mount a considerable broadside attack and was able to inflict substantial damage, with Maynard losing close to 1/3 of his forces, and one of his ships being eliminated from the battle due to his captain, second, and third officers being killed. However, small armed fire from the Jane, which was Maynard's ship, caused the Adventure, Blackbeard's ship, jibbed sheet to be cut, which led to Blackbeard losing control and run onto the sandbar. It is also speculated that the Jane and Roger were both grounded as well, so it became a battle of who could get it off the bar first. Somehow, both the Jane and the Adventure had managed to lighter themselves close and close the gap between each other enough so that Edward Teach, Blackbeard, could lead his men across the deck of Maynard's ship by throwing grappling hooks and grenades. Blackbeard had been deceived, however, since most of the forces of Maynard were held under deck, giving the impression that the forces could be easily conquered. Both Blackbeard and Maynard fired shots at each other, and when both didn't hit their mark, drew swords.
Blackbeard refused to be taken alive, and at one point during the battle shouted to Lieutenant Maynard, "Damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters, or take any from you,"
and driven to the bow, where he was slashed across the neck and then attacked and killed. Teach had been shot at least 5 times, as well as being slashed close to 20 times all over his body when his body had been examined. His head was then severed from his body and hung from the bowsprit of Maynard's vessel to show the world who had killed the dreaded pirate and that his reign of terror had ended. There was tragedy for the man who killed Blackbeard, however, as Menard was never promoted due to the fact that he took Blackbeard's booty to himself. While Blackbeard may be one of the most remembered or closely associated pirate with the Caribbean, he was certainly not the most successful, nor has any treasure of his ever been found. Pirate lore states that there's many stories that have risen about his afterlife, whether he be a spirit wandering around or even his skull being used by North Carolinians as a drinking chalice. These stories and the eyewitness accounts that have been heard about Blackbeard are what helped create the legend that we know today.
Captain, I wish to report a mutiny.